The state budget impacts every agency here in Louisiana, including the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. Already, Commissioner of Ag and Forestry, Dr. Mike Strain, has seen his budget cut by nearly 30% over the last 3 years. To get his thoughts about this year's session and about some national farm issues, we now turn to This Week in Louisiana Agriculture's Avery Davidson, who is standing by with Commissioner Strain. Avery?
Mike, as you saw in my story a moment ago, involvement from Farm Bureau members really helped shape the decisions the legislators made in this past legislative session. Joining me now is one of our Farm Bureau members and Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry, Dr. Mike Strain. And Commissioner, you used to be a legislator. Tell me a little bit about how input from your constituents played a part in the decisions you would make.
Very critical. And even before I was a legislator here with Farm Bureau, I was part of the legislative action team, and we would go and testify before the legislature on bills. Generally speaking, when a legislator gets a phone call from back home, that's considered the equivalent of 300 to 500 voters.
Well, let's talk about the process for this session. Obviously, going into it, there was a lot of question about whether some of the tax exemptions that go toward agriculture could be eliminated. Your thoughts on this session and how agriculture fared?
We started off when we began to understand the sales tax, income tax swap, and there were a lot of assets that belong to farmers that would have been taxed. And we said it's very simple. You will not put a sales tax on agriculture. That will make us non-competitive. Non-competitive with our sister states, and most importantly, non-competitive on the world market. So we worked very hard to eliminate any of those sales taxes that would have been placed on agricultural assets, on inputs. And it was very simple. If it's taxing ag, the answer is no, and no means no. And we were able to move that pretty much through the whole process. Now, as it reached the final stages before the governor pulled the bill, there were still some things that were being taxed. And basically our farming community and the legislators that stand with us said, if you're going to tax ag, if you're going to increase the taxes on the farmers, then we're not for it. And when you look at that, when you talk about a farm, you talk about 1,000 acres and you may have input of $500,000 on that 1,000 acres. Then you put 7%, 6% on top of that as a tax. And that can cut into a great deal of the farmer's profitability.
Let's go ahead and move from Baton Rouge to Washington, D.C. Recently, the Senate passed the Water Resource Development Act. Yeah. That sort of does two things because, one, it sort of addresses the harbor maintenance issue that you've been talking about for years now, but also it addresses the spill prevention, control, and countermeasure rule.
That's right. So when you talk about, we call it the WRDA bill, WRDA, right? In the WRDA bill, there is specific language that would exclude farmers who have above ground storage below 10,000 gallons from the SPCC rule. Now, as you know, we have delayed implementation of the fines until September 30th. But what EPA has said, they're still gathering data, and on September 30th, anybody that was not in compliance going back to May would be fined. And so what this does is says you're not going to implement this. And when you talk about this is a lot of overkill, and Senator Thad Cochran said it best. This increases unnecessary regulatory burden and financial burden on farmers.
And quickly addressing the other part of WRDA, harbor maintenance.
The big part about harbor maintenance, as you know, we have not been maintaining our harbors or doing the proper dredging. There's $1.65 billion a year paid for out of the money that the people pay to move goods. It's an ad valorem tax, but it's been going, more than half of it has been siphoned off by the federal government. We need to invest that money into river dredging and harbor maintenance again, because if you look in Louisiana, we have increased our exports 16% just in the last quarter. The largest port system in the world, in this hemisphere, is right here in Baton Rouge, Port of South Louisiana. We need to invest the dollars that are being paid for by the shippers of goods to do the dredging and to rebuild our waterways to be financially competitive worldwide.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. He is Commissioner Mike Strain, the Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry here in Louisiana. So, Mike, we're going to be watching as WRDA goes from the Senate into the House and see what happens there. Make sure that farmers are protected, not only on the federal level, but also at the state level. Back to you.
And following last year's low river levels, everyone along the Mississippi will be keeping an eye on that bill. Avery Davidson, thanks.